Right about now, I would like to bring on somebody for you. Want to tell you that, ask you to help me make this introduction. I'd like to say a name, and I'd like you to repeat the name. And then when we get through, we'll all add it up, and it ought to have some fun for you. Are you ready? Let me say it first. You repeat it after me. John. Paul. Ringo. George. I give you the one and only fabulous Beatles!
And how are you, everybody? This is your pal and fellow Beatlemaniac, Steve Ludwig, welcoming you to another edition of the Beatles Hour with Steve Ludwig, right here at planetludwig.com. And here we are, episode number 65. And I thought on this show I would share my humble collection of photographs of Beatle peoples, if I may borrow John's phrase from one of the Christmas messages. Beatle peoples, people in the Beatles universe that I've been lucky enough to meet or speak with. Now, these pictures are taken from the 80s, 90s, the 2000s. You'll notice which are the newer ones from my hairline. But you may be wondering, have I ever met any of the Beatles? John, Paul, George, or Ringo? No, I haven't met any of the Beatles. I've had an encounter, which I'll talk about later, but I haven't met John, Paul, George, or Ringo. However, I actually have met a Beatle. What am I saying? I met the Beatles drummer before Ringo, Pete Best, at a convention. Here we are, at a convention in New Jersey. And I must tell you, I felt a little sad when I met him. There weren't many people at his table. However, he was friendly. He was quiet-spoken, soft-spoken. And he autographed a CD for me, asked if I could pose for a picture. He said, sure. And I made sure I made some kind of contact. So I put my hand on his back, and I touched a Beatle. So remember that, okay? I touched the back of a Beatle, because I will come back to that thought later on in the show. But Pete Best, cool. Now it's time for Here Come the Sons. I recently met John's first son, Julian. Julian Lennon was super cool. He was at a book signing for one of the trilogy of books that he has written about ecology. The name of this book was Heal the Earth. And I went there. He signed the book for me. And Julian and I share the same birthday, April 8th. So I said to myself, while I'm waiting online, I'm going to mention it to him when I get up there. So I said, hey, Julian, I have 10 years on you, but we were born on the same date, April 8th. And he said, well, I guess that's a good thing. You know, he made me laugh. And he was friendly. He was cool. It was only about like 30 seconds or so. You know, you take your picture and you move on. But neat, very neat to meet Julian. Another Beatles son I met was Paul's son, James. James McCartney was at a club in Asbury Park, New Jersey. Not the Stone Pony. That's the most famous Asbury Park club for sure. But he was at a club called the Wonder Bar, and he did a set of music. He was promoting his complete EP collection CDs. And after his set, he came out very shy. Even during his set, he hardly spoke at all between songs. But he was nice enough. Whoever wanted a picture took one. So here's the picture we took. And if you're wondering, he didn't sing any Beatles songs during his set, didn't sing any of his dad's solo songs, but he did cover Neil Young's Old Man. And as a matter of fact, I believe that's on one of his CDs as well. So it was cool meeting James McCartney. The inspiration of Something, Layla, Wonderful Tonight, Pattie Boyd. She met George on the set of A Hard Day's Night. They got married. They later divorced. She then married Eric Clapton. And Pattie Boyd wrote a book called Wonderful Tonight. And she was promoting her book at one of the Beatle Fests. So I got online and I asked if she would autograph or personalize the autograph in the book for me to Steve and Sue. My wife is Sue. So I said, could you personalize it to Steve and Sue? And she said, Stu? And I laughed. I said, no, Steve and Sue. And she giggled like a teenage girl. It was so cute the way she giggled when she made the mistake she made. And as I was waiting in line, I noticed she was really friendly to everybody, smiling, having a laugh with so many people. So cool, very cool to meet Pattie Boyd. Well, I never met in person, but I did have the pleasure of speaking with Louise Harrison, George Harrison's sister. And right here at PlanetLudwig.com, I have two shows. I have the Beatles Hour, that's this show right now, and I also have Steve Ludwig's Classic Pop Culture. Well, we didn't always have the Beatles Hour, but we used to just have Steve Ludwig's Classic Pop Culture. So Louise Harrison was my guest on one of my Classic Pop Culture shows, and she was promoting her book, My Kid Brother's Band, a.k.a. the Beatles. And she told a really nice story about a phrase, around the corner, that she and her brother spoke about. And she told us that story. It was about a minute and a half. I'd like to play it for you now. And this occurred, the story she was telling, occurred while she was visiting her brother shortly before his passing in the hospital. So right before I play that, I want to show you. Here's a picture of the notes that I had ready for when I was going to interview Louise Harrison. It's a Beatles sister. Come on. So just to show you before the show, before my interview, these are all the notes I had scattered all over my desk. But here's, like I said, about a minute and a half. Here's Louise Harrison during our interview.
Last thing, I know your brother said something very quietly to you in the hospital. If you want to share this with our listeners, fine. It's in the book, but he said, let's see what's around the corner.
Oh, yes.
That's so cute. That's so cute and so beautiful. Would you care to share what that means to us?
Yeah, well, my mom, whenever we would go on vacation, it all started actually one time when we went to Llandudno in North Wales. And in Llandudno, there are two big promontories that jet out into the sea. And Mum wondered this one day. She said, "Oh, well, let's look around. Let's see what's around this corner." And we set off, and we ended up going around this huge promontory that was 4.5 miles of corners. And we kept on going around more and more corners, and none of us had anything to eat. And it took us, gosh knows how long, to get around all of these miles and miles of corners. And so whenever we would go on vacation, and she was very adventurous, and she'd say, "Oh, let's look around, what's around this corner." And we went on so many wild and woody trips that we got to the point whenever she would say, "Let's go around the corner," we would all look at each other in horror and say, "Oh no, Ron, please, don't look around another corner."
It's such a wonderful part of the story of the book.
Yeah, but when he said that to me that time, the last time that I read him, we both got into hysterics again,
So that was Louise Harrison. If you'd like to hear that full interview, by the way, just right here at PlanetLudwig.com, just find Classic Pop Culture Show number 63. You'll find it in the menu. And you can hear the whole interview with Louise Harrison. Another guest whom I had on the show, interviewed via telephone, but I did meet her, was May Pang, John Lennon's girlfriend when he and Yoko separated in the mid-'70s. And May had written a book years ago called Loving John, but she had most recently written a book called Instamatic Karma, which has some great photos, great historic photos. Anyway, I met May at a convention. We took a picture, and it just so happened that that's when we set up our interview. I met her there. So anyway, she was extremely nice during our interview. She herself, May, had a podcast, and our interview was scheduled for 11:15 in the morning, and her podcast was to go on at noon. And she said, "Listen, I'll be happy to, we'll do the We'll do the interview at 11:15. It's just I have to be done with, for my podcast." So I said, "That's fair enough." So we set it up, and I interviewed May. And we talked about Walls and Bridges, of which she was a part. We talked about, her time with John. And I also asked her, what happens when you bump into Yoko? And she told me. And if you'd like to hear that answer, how's that for a little come on? Just right here at Planet Ludwig, you can hear that interview. That's Classic Pop Culture Show number 65. That I interviewed May Pang. Very nice. Now, this next picture, talk about a Beatle peoples. What are the Beatle peoples in the Beatles sphere? Certainly, Harry Nilsson has to be mentioned. His best friend was Ringo. Ringo was Harry's best friend at Harry's wedding, at one of Harry's marriages. Anyway, way back, as you'll see in this picture right here at a Beatle convention, I met Harry Nilsson. I believe this was in Rye, New York, that convention. Anyway, Harry Nilsson was there supporting handgun control. Of course, that was his. That was one of his great charitable events. Whenever he had the chance after John was murdered, whenever he would make an appearance. Anyway, he was about set to come on stage, and he was standing to the side. It was about 10:30 in the morning. I laughed because he had a Bloody Mary in his hand already. 10:30 in the morning. Hey, why not? And so while he was waiting to go on, I just went over to him. I said, "Hey, Harry, can I take a picture with you?" He said, Yeah. So I gave someone my camera. Here's the picture we took, Harry and me. And what was cool also was during his set, he sang a couple of songs. I think while he was singing "Give Peace a Chance," I was right down near the front, and he came over and put his hand out and shook my hand again. Like, we took a picture, and then during his little on stage set, he shook my hand. He goes, "How you doing there, brother?" In that Harry Nilsson voice. It was cool, very cool. So much. I love Harry so much. And I did a show here. This sounds like a big commercial, doesn't it? But I love to share, things we do on the show that have to do with the Beatles and all. Anyway, we have a Harry Nilsson celebration show. 2.5 hours of Harry Nilsson music here at Planet Ludwig. And it's show number 90. So if you ever want to listen to that, please feel free. I think if you're a Harry fan, I know you'll enjoy that show. Now, speaking of Wings, I know we weren't, but now we are. Speaking of Wings, I met 3 Wings, 3 members of Wings. Not Paul. Someday. But I was very, very fortunate to meet Denny Lane at a convention the weekend of 100 Stars, 100 Rock Stars. I'm sorry, I'm getting the title wrong, but my friend Charles Rosen, a super guy, great promoter, a lot of fun events. Anyway, at his events, I met Denny Lane. And, of course, Denny Lane not only was with Wings, but before that, he was with the original Moody Blues when they were more of an R&B band. And if I may just throw out a little personal thing here, aside from Denny Laine being nice, I'd love you to hear the solo version of a song called The Note You Never Wrote. I'm trying to find out what Denny Laine's solo album it was on, but check it out on YouTube. Now that song, of course, appears on the Wings at the Speed of Sound album, but I actually like the solo Denny Laine version of that song. And just check it out if you ever get a chance. I think you'll really like. I prefer the solo version than the version on the Wings at the Speed of Sound. Not that that's a bad version, of course, but I definitely like the Denny Laine solo version better. Now, saw the picture there of the Wildlife album cover with Denny Laine. Also on that album cover was the first Wings drummer, Denny Seiwell. And I had the pleasure of meeting Denny Seiwell. And here's a picture of Denny and me. Denny was cool. Just talking about a couple of things, a couple of personal things, actually. And if you'll notice in the background, to the right of the picture, also at the signing tables where I took that picture with Denny Seiwell, is Lawrence Juber, another member of Wings. Now, of course, after Denny, I went over and took a picture with Lawrence, but of course, I can't find that picture. However, I do have this autograph from Lawrence Juber, from a book of his. So, yep. I keep remembering these pictures I took of people in the Beatles universe, and I said, where the heck is that picture? Where's that picture? Where's that picture? Anyway, there's sort of a picture of me with Lawrence Juber. No, it's not going to work out that way, even though he's behind me and has no idea at the time who I am. Okay. Victor Spinetti. Oh man, he appeared in Hard Day's Night, Help, Magical Mystery Tour. Well, he was at one of the Beatle conventions promoting his book, Victor Spinetti Up Front, his strictly confidential autobiography. And very cool guy, very friendly guy. I know I'm saying that a lot, that they're all cool and friendly, but they have been. All the people that I've met have been, not once have I had any bad karma with any of them. And here's Victor Spinetti, and I just remember him from the very beginning of the Beatle movies, as the stage manager, or the director rather, in A Hard Day's Night, and it was a real thrill. The late Victor Spinetti, unfortunately, he passed away. Well, the first concert promoter to bring the Beatles over to the United States. Everybody? Sid Bernstein. And he brought the Beatles over in both 1965 and 66, and they had those legendary concerts at Shea Stadium, especially the 1965 concert. Well, I met Sid Bernstein, and here we are. Sid also brought, as a promoter, brought the Stones, Herman's Hermits, the Moody Blues, the early Moody Blues, the Kinks, over to America, and promoted all those shows as well. So, nice to meet Sid Bernstein, the late Sid Bernstein, again, unfortunately. Well, the Beatles during 64 to 66, going to concerts and all, and being in all these cities, they had to be driven around by somebody. Alf Bicknell was the Beatles chauffeur from 64 to 66, and all I have is an autograph, but I thought I would share that with you. Alf Bicknell is also deceased, my goodness. But I don't talk about a brain freeze. I didn't even take a picture with Alf Bicknell at the time. I just got online, bought his book, got his autograph. So here's his autograph. And but I met the Beatles chauffeur. So there you go, and I'm very happy to have. Now, a guy who I met in 1983. Paul Gorish. He's a photographer. Some of you may certainly recognize his name. He befriended John in 1979, John and Yoko. In 1979, he took tons of pictures of John and Yoko. And Paul is the photographer that took that very, historic but infamous, in his words too, infamous picture of John signing the autograph, signing the album cover of the, excuse my language, of the scum who murdered him later that night, the night that he was signing the album. Well, I'm not going to show that picture to you because I don't want, I'm not even going to say his name, John's murderer. I don't want to give him any kind of publicity. But John, of course, died in 1980. In 1983, I met Paul while I was working a second job in a video store. Paul had stopped in to buy some Beatles statues. I recognized his name from the picture that was on the front page of the Daily News 3 years ago. Anyway, we stayed friends up until Paul passed away in 2018 at the age of 58. So these are pictures. Paul gave me a bunch of pictures. And here's early on in our friendship, he signed the back of this photo that he gave me. And he was just a good guy. And, it's funny. The pictures that you saw of Paul with John, that's the only pictures he took with John. He said he didn't want to trade on his friendship and keep asking John to pose for pictures. John actually suggested they take pictures, a picture together. And the Watching the Wheels picture sleeve, that's Paul's picture that Paul took. And Paul was always so proud on the flip side of the picture sleeve is his name, Paul Gorish. So, R.I.P. Paul Gorish. And I just wanted to show you this picture of me outside the Dakota building. Here's a picture at West 72nd Street. Now, I want to share a little something with you too. Now, not a person, a thing, a Beatle thing, or a thing having to do with Beatle lore. But most of you, or I'm assuming most of you, I shouldn't say that, but Strawberry Fields Forever, the song Strawberry Fields Forever, was inspired by John's childhood when he used to play in the Salvation Army Children's Home at Strawberry Field in Liverpool. He used to play with the orphans there in the orphanage on the fields and all. So that's where Strawberry Fields Forever came from. Well, they recently, a few years ago, demolished, I think it was 2018, they demolished the original children's home and they're rebuilding it, but there were 2,500 bricks. And I own one of those bricks from the Salvation Army Children's Home, the Strawberry Fields Orphanage, if you will. Strawberry Field Orphanage. And here are some pictures of that brick. And I am proud to own it. Little piece of Beatles history. You fellow Beatlemaniacs understand why I needed to have this brick. Now, sticking kind of in the Beatles universe, maybe one little step removed. TV show of the 60s, based on the Beatles. Come on. One of all of our favorite bands, the Monkees, right? Well, I am very lucky to have met 3 of the Monkees. I did not get to meet yet Mike Nesmith. I have no Nez, but I do have pictures with Davy Jones, Peter Tork, and Mickey Dolenz. So I'm going to show you those now. As a matter of fact, here I am with Davy Jones, the late Davy Jones. And I met Davy Jones at a Chiller Theater pop convention. And at the time, Peter Tork had just had the problem with his throat cancer, his tongue cancer. So I asked Davy how Peter was doing. and I had a recorder going in my pocket. So I'm going to play that just a few seconds. You'll hear it's kind of muffled a little bit, but I think it's, you might be able to make it out a bit. So here's Davy Jones and I asked him how Peter's doing.
He's doing real good. He's always been cleared up and everything else, and he's in good spirits, Pretty scary stuff. But I actually know a couple of people that had the same problem. I've been told about people that had the same problem, and it's curable. It's scary anyway. I mean, I don't know. I mean, how do these things happen? It's like weird, isn't it? Well, and that's how somebody says, "Oh, you're next."
And R.I.P. Davy Jones. R.I.P. also Peter Talk, whom I met at another of Charles Rosenay's conventions. Peter was cool, nice. Again, I'm saying that about everybody, but it is true. He was a little quiet, Peter, on this particular day, but a thrill to meet him. And here's Mickey Dolenz. Some people, I don't see it, but some people say, oh, you could be related to Mickey Dolenz. You guys have the same kind of squinty eyes or whatever, but I don't know. However, I am happy to have met Mickey Dolenz, 3 of the Monkees. Just before we say goodbye, I do have another quick picture or two to share with you and a little story about it. Now, we started off my pictures with a picture of me and Pete Best, right? First Beatles drummer. Well, Beatles drummer before Ringo. Well, Ringo's star, back on May 12th, 1998, Ringo and the Roundheads played at a club in Greenwich Village, New York, called The Bottom Line. No longer there. What a great club that was. If any of you are listening and have ever been to that club, you know how great it was. Well, Ringo played at The Bottom Line as kind of not a rehearsal, but as a warm-up for his VH1 Storytellers special that aired in 1998. So, Ringo was at The Bottom Line, and I want to show you a picture I took from my seat. It was very cool, close, okay? But as you're looking at that picture, now, by the way, I was at this show with Paul Gorish, but as you're looking at this picture, to the left of that picture is the bar. You can't see it, but it's the bar at The Bottom Line. Okay, Ringo was I think it was 7 o'clock was his show. But then after Ringo's show, it was just one show, one set. And then later on that night at 9:30, there was another performer, not with Ringo. Ringo was going to leave. So after Ringo's set was done, the people at The Bottom Line, the announcer said, thank you for coming. Please make your way out as we need to clean up and get set for our next show, our next performer. Okay, so I get up, start to walk out, and Paul Gorish says to me, where are you going? I said, we got to get out of here. Getting ready for the next show. He said, let's just go over to the bar for a drink, for a quick drink. And Paul knew just what he was doing, because there's only one way, believe it or not, in or out of The Bottom Line for the performers, and that's through the front door. And you have to walk from backstage through the club out the front door. And he said, we're going to stand here. We're not leaving till Ringo walks by. I said, okay. So we're at the bar, and before long, there's a little rustling and an entourage, not a big entourage, but a group of people coming out from the back, and his band was walking by, and I turned around, and right there is Joe Walsh, who was in the band that night. And I'm looking right at him, and he just stuck his hand out and shook my hand. He didn't give it the old, how you doing? He didn't give that Joe Walsh thing, but he just stuck his hand, and I said, hey, Joe. He goes, how are you? He just kind of nodded his head at me and moved on. And then Barbara Bach walked by, and then there's Ringo walking by. I mean, I didn't have my camera ready or anything. I'm so mad at myself. But as Ringo walked by us, I managed to stick my hand over and pat him on the back and say, hey, Ringo, good show. And he, hi, thank you, everybody, walking through. But I touched Ringo's back. and I touched Pete Best's back. I touched 2 Beatle backs, 2 Beatle drummer backs. How about that? And you fellow Beatle fans and Beatle maniacs know how important that is to have that on my resume, in my life, in my Beatle life. And with that, I think it's a good place for us to end my little photo show. Thank you so much for listening and watching. And until next time, everybody, may all of your days be fab. Bye for now, everybody.
And we all hope that you've enjoyed the show. Have you enjoyed the show? Good.
Okay, put the red light off.
This is Johnny Rhythm just saying good night to you all and God bless you.
All right, well, that's got it done then. What are we going to do now?
Has he turned it off?
I think he has. Have you turned it off, lad? Hey, Basher.
And they're still the same.
Turned it off, Basher.